Hello, everybody, and welcome to Riftbound Ramblings. I'm your host, Barrett, and today is August 13th, 2025, which is a Wednesday, and we've got some updates that have been given to us so far this week, including some images for mats, playmats that will be available. And what I'm really excited about here is that if you look very closely on the edge in the kind of top right, bottom right corner, is that I think these are going to be embroidered, which is really nice. But we have some art that you've already seen before on some cards that have been put and blown up onto playmats. So first off, wanted to highlight this Volibear mat, which I think looks incredibly nice. They also have this Jinx playmat that was given to us. I actually really like the colors here and how it, even like the Riftbound logo kind of popping in the corner. So I like this one a lot as well. We were then shown also this Misfortune playmat. Again, I just really like this art in general. I would love to have this as a playmat, especially if Misfortune gets a little more popular. And then, of course, you know her, you love her. We were also then given the Ari playmat, which, I mean, I already think this is the best alt art over number, I should say, and so it's probably going to be the best playmat, also in my opinion. Now, that being said, we were given a little bit more information today on things about not today on the 11th. So on Monday, we were told about the Spirit Forged release dates, right? And we saw that there was going to be a gap once again for the Chinese release and the English release. And so there was a clarifying repost and a reply to this tweet from @VictorAlroge. Hey, are you going to keep the delay here on these sets, or is this something that you're looking to get rid of? And Riftbound officially responded to that tweet saying, that's a great question. Yes, we will be closing this gap between China and the rest of the world release in our first few sets. How quickly is that going to happen? I don't know. But this is not going to be something normal for all of these sets, and so that is something to look forward to if you're not a fan of that layout. But today, the main point of this video is, today specifically on Wednesday, Riot has given us some frequently asked questions and revised and clarified rulings for the core rules and interactions on cards and how to play the game. For everybody who has been playing and playtesting and trying to figure out what they want to do as soon as Riftbound hits the market for everybody, well, they've given us a lot more clarification on these rules. And there's some stuff in here that I wanted to go through and pinpoint a little bit more, but I'm going to basically go through this whole document. And if you just rolled your eyes, I don't blame you. I will put a link to this document in the description below. But I think there's some stuff talking about. The biggest one right away, as I highlight, as part of these revised and clarified rulings, we have also updated some card wordings. This is including erratas, and those updated wordings will be put into our database of official card wordings Watcher. You'll soon have access to Watcher and his official wordings through our website and also the Riftbound API. This is crazy cool because this is essentially creating a database for people to always have access to card erratas if things in the future of this card game change as well. In Magic, I believe it's called Oracle. This is something I wish more card games would adopt, and the fact that Riftbound is going to be rolling it out immediately is really good news. I think, just because when you release cards, sorry, a little background knowledge. If you release cards and you eventually change into a better format in the future, it's really hard to go back and retroactively keep a lock and key of all of those things. But if you just have a card database that's going to be available to everybody, and you clarify those card changes here, you can just always keep it updated and you don't have to worry about anything. Rules updates will be accompanied by the definitive Watcher errata text. Other note about these erratas: erratas may impact the effective power level of cards. They have no plans to issue erratas strictly for power level reasons, only to make cards work within the rules as they're intended. They then talk about some shorthand on what they're going to be talking about in this document specifically here in this e-means section. But again, not going to go through all of this. Just going to go this. And then that's why I said this format's going to be a little bit different. This is literally me scrolling through this PDF and it's going to be a little, it's not very visually appealing, and I understand that, but I think a lot of this information is important, and I'm going to try and hit the high points and low points. A lot of these are going to be individual ruling questions that you may have or may not have depending on the game. So conquering and holding, I think this one's pretty straightforward, but if you have any questions, they go here. I think this section right here matters a lot more. How does the last point work? So this tells you in 1v1 games, if you're at 8 points, how do you win? If you're at 6 and you conquer both, you go to 7, you go to 8, you win. If you're at 7 points and you conquer both, you'll only draw one card on the first one because you can't go to 8 unless you get both, but then when you get the second one, you'll get to 8 and you'll win. If you're at 6 points and you hold one battlefield going to 7, you conquer the other one, you go to 8 and you win. If you're at 7 points and you just hold one, you go to 8 and you win. So this kind of specifies all of that. And then it just breaks it down even further if there's 3 battlefields in play, which basically just means that this 6 or 7 starting point can be 5 or 6 instead. And you have to do a little bit more work. This talks about movement, standard movements. That makes more sense. Do I have to exhaust the unit when I move with a spell or ability? The answer is no. If the ability makes you move a thing, you do the thing. Moving or exhausting a unit to move a thing is a cost when doing the actual action to move. Can I move multiple units together to a battlefield? The answer is yes when you attack. But usually if it's a spell or ability that doesn't move, it specifies how many do it. Does ganking allow a unit to move an extra time? No, it doesn't. It just gives it the ability to move in a different way. Can I move more units in before a combat starts without using a spell ability? Not typically. You can't really do this. You have to use a spell ability that moves them. Moving is a action you do during your turn in between showdowns, basically. A lot of questions here about combat. Same total might. Again, I'm not trying to go through all of these. When do units heal from combat damage and when? I think this part specifies here. Units everywhere will heal from damage at the end of every combat. So that is important when you're assigning damage to units that are not necessarily going to be affected into a showdown, and then you move into a showdown. How do the runes work? This talks about energy and power. I think a lot of that makes sense. Is there a limit to how many runes you can have? Yeah, it's 12. That's how big your deck is. Do seals add energy? No. Do they add power? Yes. Accelerate cost talks about that. For units to be mighty, do I get my Legion effect when I play a token or use an ability? The answer is no. You have to play a card. Speaking of playing cards, they talk about some of the hidden rulings. How do I hide a card? Do you have to have control of the battlefield? When I hide a card, does that count for Legion? The answer is no. Hiding isn't playing, and it doesn't count as playing a card for abilities like Legion. If I hit a card, again, there's 36 pages of this, guys, so I'm really just trying to scroll through. And I think there is some more important things that I do want to go by card, which is they talk about like card erratas. But some interesting ones is do I use the exhaust ability of a unit in combat, or can I? The answer is typically no. This talks about a lot of you have to have action or reaction keywords to do that. So the answer is yes if it's a readied unit, as long as it has one of these keyword timings. Because then it also, well, if I have Vi, can I keep recycling cards from my trash to increase their might? And it says when. Well, this doesn't have action or reaction, so you can only do it during your main phase outside of a showdown. Legend ability on my opponent's turn. This one's important. I have a reaction spell. Can I play it at the end of my opponent's turn? And the answer is just no. The only time that you can do this is if you are piggybacking off and creating a chain off of another ability that triggers at the end of your opponent's turn, aka Annie, the legend. You can't just be playing cards with nothing on the stack, basically, and ending your turn doesn't create an opportunity like passing priority for a stack. In a free-for-all, can I play actions and reactions in a showdown that I don't have any units at? Yes. The answer is yes. There's no maximum hand size, in case you were wondering. Maximum number of units on a base or battlefield? There isn't one. When you run out of cards in your main deck, this makes sense. This teaches you what burnout is. This is in the rules. It doesn't really matter for the frequently asked questions. And then running out of cards in your rune deck doesn't do anything. And this talks about specification for chosen champion. Okay, revised and clarified rulings of cards. Some of this I think matters. Some of this is going to include some erratas, and that's the main reason why I made this video, because I think erratas matter for what people believe are going to be good or bad cards. This is talking about cards that tell you to play other cards from their own effects. This is a very long section. Doesn't actually involve a errata. It kinda. It's going to talk about baited hook and blind fury. This specifically says now when you're going to play cards from other effects, they are going to do a lot better job of adding this line of text that says banish a thing from among them, and then you play the thing after this whole ability resolves. Because the whole point and the dilemma that people had was you want me to play a thing, but this ability must resolve before I can play that thing, which then includes recycling. So people had a misconstrued evaluation. So basically, all of these cards got eroded to where now the card gets banished and then plays them. And this includes things like Undazzling Aurora and Promising Future. And then this will also specify, yes, you guessed it, with Nocturne. This, I think, answers a lot of the questions on how we use Nocturne and what the power level of Nocturne is going to look like. So, what about Nocturne? How does his ability work? Is it a triggered ability? Can I use it if I reveal him or only if I look at him? Nocturne has a few problems that we'd like to address. His ability is worded like a triggered ability, but you can't really work like one. He has the same problem of the above cards we just talked about, which is when you're trying to play them from a deck, in this case Nocturne itself, it's hard to put him back there if you try to play him, but he can't be there for some reason. He is intended to be usable anytime you're looking at front faces of cards from the top of your deck. Whether the effect in question says to look at them or reveal them, the rules will be changed to clarify that last one. So, Nocturne is getting an errata. Nocturne will now say, as you look at or reveal me from the top of your deck, you may banish me. If you do, you may play me for any power. So this is great. This means it works for vision. It works off of the Teemo that we'll get to later further down. This works off of stacked deck, which is looking at them. It works off of revealing him. If I reveal multiple Nocturnes, can I play more than one? The answer is yes. If you literally flip all three of them from an effect like stacked deck, you do get them all. You will, however, get nothing from stacked deck, but you will instead have three Nocturnes. So if Promising Future resolves and one or more players chooses to banish Nocturne from the cards they looked at, what happens? Yada, yada, yada. You'll get the Nocturne. You'll also get the card from Promising Future. What about Dazzling Aura? If I reveal a Nocturne, do I get to play him and keep going? No. Dazzling Aurora stops when you find Nocturne. If Nocturne is revealed, you may choose to banish him or not. If you banish him, you can play him for any power. If you don't, you just play him for free, so probably better if you just do that. I really like how transparent they are of like, hey, if you're trying to optimize, which is really what a lot of these frequently asked questions are for, they give you the answer like, yeah, the answer is here's the ruling, and you probably don't want to pay the power for it. This one I think is fine. If I use baited hook and I kill off unlicensed armory, what happens? Uh, Baited hook specifically looks for the might of the thing, and this doesn't have a might, so the thing you kill is going to give you a null value, which means you won't get anything. Or sorry, when saving a thing with unlicensed armory, sorry. You didn't kill the unit because you instead saved it, you won't get anything. Convergent Mutation got an eroded. It is now says choose a friendly unit this turn. The English version of this card was missing the words this turn. So a lot of people thought that the might stayed for the entirety of that card existing. Hey, Dune Drake had the same problem. It just didn't say this turn. So Dune Drake now says you get +2 might this turn. Uh, Probably makes them worse in people's eyes because they didn't understand how they worked. But if you were keeping an eye out on the Chinese reveals, you kind of already knew. Same thing with Ravenborn Tomb. The next spell you play this turn deals 1 bonus damage. Just kind of missing all this wordings. Okay, this talks about targeting and making choices for spells. I think a lot of people were confused on when I make the choice to counter spell or to play Defy. It's not called Defy. If you're going to counter somebody's spell, when do I make that decision? Is it before or after my opponent makes choices for their spells and abilities? And in short of all of this, you must choose all of your targets. There are some other specifications. If a card, for it to basically resolve, at the time of you adding the card, once you put the spell or ability on the chain, is when these choices typically have to be made. There are some exceptions. So, for example, as I play Charm, I have to say not only what unit I'm moving, I have to say where I'm moving it, and the answer is yes. Making the change to those rules. This means to move effects that don't mention a destination like Charm work the same way as those like Showstopper. You have to specify where they go. What about when I use an in a unit standard move? Does that target? No, it doesn't. Standard move is a special action that doesn't use the chain, can't be reacted to, so the concept of targeting doesn't really matter. It doesn't really apply. Spells with multiple targets. If a spell has multiple targets like back to back, do I need to choose targets for all of them to put the spell on the chain? And the answer is yes. Even if those targets don't exist there, it will still resolve as much as possible. Which is you if only one of those units is there after you've made the choices, you'll still give 2 might to one of them, but if the other one died for some reason, it's gone. What about triggered abilities with multiple targets like Sona? Sona says at the end of your turn, if I'm at a battlefield, ready for friendly runes. What if you don't have four? Going forward, they're going to be adding the words up to on most triggered abilities so that you can get as much as you can out of it without um, breaking the intuitiveness. So this works for Sona. They're going to be the revised text for Sona is ready up to 4 friendly units. Targon's Peak, ready up to 2 runes at the end of this turn. Uh, Annie, same idea, ready up to 2 runes. Kinko Mug, buff up to 2 other friendly units. Sigil of the Storm, does it target? If it does, can I react to the trigger by recycling the chosen rune for the power? That seems weird. Sigil of the Storm is receiving an errata, using new wording to make sure that it doesn't target, and using new wording known as must that indicates an action must be taken. None of the choices made for such an ability if they chosen. When you conquer here, you must recycle one of your runes. This is a forced action kind of thing. It makes sense. Foxfire are the units I choose for Foxfire targets. What happens if some of them gain might as a reaction? Um, Target legality is evaluated as a group rather than individually. As you play, you'll choose any number of units in a single battlefield whose current might is 4 or less. Then timing happens. It tells you all of the breakdown. It tells you the whole breakdown. Uh, Same idea here. Dragon's Rage also seems a little confusing under these new targeting rules. What do I have to choose as I play it? Dragons actually works a little better now. That move destinations are chosen at the same time as targets, but it's still a little strange. Dragon's Range revised text says move an enemy unit. You have to make that choice. Then do this. They're adding this then do this reflexive triggers. So what you're choosing at the beginning is moving an enemy unit. So you're going like Charm. You're going to pick where it goes, and you're going to pick anything you're targeting. Your opponent then makes the choice to counter or do a thing. If they let this resolve, then you do this thing, which is choose another enemy unit at its destination, deal damage equal to their mights to each other. So this doesn't have to be chosen before we get to resolving this effect, but this part does, the move an enemy unit. It's going to work similarly. They are going to be adding this wording to things that, as they say here, how does disintegrate work? Doesn't the damage kill the unit after the spell is resolved? Disintegrate's a funny one. It looks like it's supposed to work, but the more you understand the rules, the more it looks like it doesn't work after all. So they're going to be adding that reflexive wording. Deal 3 damage to a unit at a battlefield. If it kills it, do this, which is draw 1 card. Same thing here. So this is where like cards like Falling Star work more intuitively with how they're worded, but are in my head they're buffed by this. Uh, the do this wording looks a lot like Falling Star and Acathian Rain. Are those reflexive triggers too? Yes, they are. This means that these 2 spells no longer actually have any targets of their own. You play them with no choices. If they then are resolved, you get to put each of the instance of the reflexive triggers on the chain separately, choosing the same as the different units. You'll pay your deflect costs when you put each trigger on the chain, and then the triggered abilities will resolve one at a time in the opposite order they were put on the chain. Because you just say, do this, deal 3 to a unit. You don't have to choose what they are unless this goes through. This talks about a lot of the cooperative gameplay, and they do some wording of friendly units. Do I control friendly units for my friend that's sitting next to me in our 2v2 game? And if so, how do my wordings work for your units, and then sharing control of battlefields and stuff like that. So things like the Siren and Yasuo Legend are getting erratas, revive text. Move a friendly unit at a base to its base, whereas currently it says to your base. So that means a friendly unit is your friend's guy, but it will go back to their base, not your base. Same thing here with Yasuo and Portal Rescue. It's very similar. This talks about some hidden wordings. Um, this is kind of a nerf, I think, to some hidden cards that we were talking about. Specifically, uh, it gains several additional restrictions and rules that were somewhat unclear. If a hidden spell or play effect of a hidden permanent chooses any targets, those targets must be chosen from among options at that battlefield unless the ability explicitly restricts targeting in a way that makes this impossible. So, that means there are some spells that are worse because of this. But it means Tide Turner kind of makes a little bit more sense and is getting an errata to make it work. When you play me, you may choose a unit you control at another location. Yeah, that makes sense. That's what this card was trying to do. Move me to its location and it to my original location. Makes sense. But then this question is asked about Zonia's Hourglass and Stand United. Now, Zonia's Hourglass just kind of checks when the next thing dies. The gear obviously goes to your base. It doesn't actually get played at the battlefield as a hidden card. But Stand United is now specifying, yes, you have to buff a friendly unit at this battlefield, but then the global buff of the Stand United will count for everything that you have. Ava gets some clarification here. Does Ava let me hide cards? And the answer is no. It lets you play cards with the hidden in your hand, which makes sense. What restrictions does Ava place on the card I play? What does here mean? Ava's restrictions to here apply only to units. She'll receive a minor errata. When I attack, you can pay a mind to play a card with hidden from your hand, ignoring its cost if it's a unit played here. Basically, it makes sense. What can pack of wonders return my hand? It just kind of specifies, gets a little revised text. And then we go to cards that replace units that are dying. This is similarly to how they made some. Uh, does the damage on the unit stay? This is basically the question here. If the unit died to lethal damage, doesn't it just die again? So they're basically all getting kind of erratas that say, choose a friendly unit. The next time it dies this turn, heal it, exhaust it, and recall it instead, which means you send it to your base. It doesn't count as a move. So they're all going to heal your things now, including set as we get further down. Can I save a unit that's already in its base? The answer is yes. It being moved to the base isn't a requirement of saving it. It's just you do as much as you can. If I use Cruel Patron and kill off one of my units as an additional cost, but it's then replaced and saved, does it still work? Yes. He's just a mandatory cost that makes you do the thing. It doesn't matter if the game doesn't care if it died or not. Same thing by Hidden Blade. This is a better for everyone that doesn't understand. Hidden Blade is very good, but essentially you could kill off one of your units. If you save it from like a set effect, do you still draw the 2 because it was your own unit? And the answer is yes. Again, Hidden Blade doesn't care if the unit actually died or not. It just checks the controller of the card, which was your own dude, and then you saved it. I think this Garen interaction makes a lot of sense already, but in case you didn't understand, Garen can give a recruit plus 1 might, putting it to 2. If my opponent attacks, a total might during the combat is 6. They deal 5 to Garen and then 1 to the recruit. Does the recruit die? And the answer is no, because the recruit has 2 when damage happens. Once the lethal, then we check to kill things, and then all the units are immediately healed after before it would check again. So that little recruit is still gonna have 1 might. In a similar sense, Death Knell from Kog'Maw. This functions basically how we thought it was going to, which makes him not necessarily the greatest, but it is similar for the reason on how the Garen one works. This one clarifies about damage from spells and abilities, so it gets a little bit of revised text update for Unyielding Spirit. This one makes sense. And then it specifies again. Then we go into Immortal Phoenix. What does this mean to kill a unit with a spell? It seems like Hidden Blade counts, but what about a spell that deals damage? A spell that causes a unit to deal damage? A spell that causes a unit to die in some other way, like Stupefy on a unit that has 1 or more might and it has its damage currently marked on it. They basically break it all down here. There's a lot of stuff. I'm not going to go through it all. Can Immortal Phoenix return if it is the unit that was killed, or if it and other units were killed at the same time? For example, can I Hidden Blade my own Phoenix and immediately replay it? And the answer is yes. Void Gate. Specifies if I'm dealing damage to two things and one of them is on void gate and one of them is not, only the thing at void gate is going to take the extra damage. Clarification for the trigger of Darius Trifarian. If Darius is the second card, yes, it sees itself. If Darius is the third card, no, it obviously doesn't see himself because he says when you play your second card. Hollow Tomb clarification for if there's just a different copy of your chosen champion, can you pick it? Yeah, that's why it says the term chosen champion. Karma, recycling runes. This one makes sense if you just read Karma. Does it work out for recycling runes? No. On Karma, it says cards from your main deck. Does Karma trigger off of recycling cards into other players' main decks? Again, no. She says your main deck, which is this revised text. Sun Disk clarification. Um, it is a Legion ability that is on a Exhaust ability, which means you can play Sun Legion and then do the effect on Sun Legion. Yes, absolutely. Symbol of Solari specifies with fights that are ties. Teemo Strategist, I do want to talk about this one a little bit because this is kind of relating to the Nocturne thing. This says, what does this card do and when can you do it? If I play him from hidden during combat, does his ability trigger twice? It doesn't trigger twice because he says when I defend or I'm played. Uh, but basically, this is how defend and attack triggers work, and we're issuing a minor errata for Teemo to do this, clarifying that his ability does and how many targets it has contradicts some previous guidance that we've given on the card. Teemos has a when I defend trigger. Under previous rules, attack and defend triggers happen only at the beginning of combat. Teemo's dual trigger condition was meant to cover this. He either triggered at the beginning of combat or he triggered when you played him. He now says, when I defend, choose an enemy unit here and reveal the top 5 cards. And the reason they got rid of the play part is because now defend triggers on the updated rules. Attack and defend triggers trigger anytime a unit becomes the attacker or defender. So as soon as it comes in due to the trigger response or the hidden play, it is now defending, you get your defend triggers. This does then note, yes, this means that if a unit that starts in combat, moves out, and then moves back can trigger its abilities twice. We think this is fine. Moving a unit at action speed isn't easy to do, and doing it twice is even harder, so we don't mind there being a reward. That's pretty cool. I like that. Assault and Shield are not attack or defend triggers. They work the same way they did before. They're just kind of continuous things, so you don't have to worry about that. As this rule change makes the played from hidden part of Tino's text redundant, and since the ability only does the thing as enemies are present, we're issuing the errata. Yada yada. How many enemy units do I target with Teemo? It's one. Just one. Which cards count for Teemo? Does Ember Monk count? What about Noxus Saboteur? Teemo counts only cards that have the hidden keyword, not cards that mention hidden but don't actually have them. They do not have the hidden keyword. Does Wraith of Echoes trigger its own death? It does not. It does not. It does not see them die. See himself die. So, just for clarification, now the card says the first time another friendly unit dies each turn, draw one. What about other units that die at the same time as Wraith of Echoes? This is a very magic question. And the answer is no. It dies too, so it doesn't see them. What happens if the first time a unit dies in a turn is actually 2 or more units dying simultaneously? Does it trigger twice? Only once. First time happens, it only does it once. This breaks down the targeting thing that we kind of talked about earlier. It's very long. There's a lot of stuff here. But that is the end of that section. And that's it. A good 30 minutes of kind of breaking down what's going on here, but I do think there was some relevant information. So, I hope you learned something. If you have any other questions or you want to go through the document yourself, I will be putting the link below. And of course, if you liked the video, give it a like. I know this is kind of not what I normally do, but we haven't really gotten much other news this week, so I'm doing the best I can. Of course, leave a comment down below if you liked some of these changes. I'm very much more excited for Nocturne clarifications, so that makes me excited to play with that card. And then, of course, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a time when I upload a video. But thanks so much for sticking around for this long one, and we'll see you in the next one.